Perfect.
Hi.
Awesome. So did everyone have an okay time finding this week's reading assignment in the events calendar? Ongoing, those, I'll mention them at the end of our session, and then I'll have them, Kirsten will post them for me on the events calendar. So that should help support you. So you don't have to worry about scratching down notes and whatnot, especially today's reading for next week in preparation for our first special guest will be pretty specific. So if you happen to have pen and paper nearby, fabulous. If you don't worry about it. Just a heads up in advance, in the case that I forget, there are a few links in the chat already, specifically one to a YouTube video that I recommend you look at later. So if it's easy for you to grab that link and drop it somewhere, I personally have, I use Evernote, and I just drop links like that in there, which makes it really easy for me to grab those links after the fact, and then I can give them some kind of like searchable title later. So that's already there. That link will also be on the events calendar where you found this link. So know that it will be there. Hi, everyone. I love it. I feel so honored that everyone shows up. I'm just like, oh, this is great. Amazing. All right. Today, we're going to pick up where we left off on page 24. I'm going to shift the format just a little bit from last week. We're going to move into a little bit more discussion based on the subjects within. So I'm going to ask people if it feels right now to get courageous or brave and talk about your own experiences. And my hope is that we'll be able to take some of the definitions that have been provided for us in the Snow Sports Teaching Manual and to start to hear some real life examples of what these things look like, right? So before we get started, I want to share a quote with you today. All right, this is from Leonard Cohen. Act the way you'd like to be, and soon you'll be the way you act. All right, so starting on page 24 in the Snow Sports Manual, if you have it, I want to start with social awareness. So there were a few key things that I pulled out of what social awareness is. The word empathy jumped out at me, for me. That was one of the biggest pieces. And the ability to notice someone else's emotions, emotional tendencies, right, and motivations. Those were the big things that drew me in from that short piece of reading on page 24. And what I want to ask is if someone, truly from your own life experience, if you would like to define social awareness, what it means to you right now in this moment. Be wrong. I encourage you to be wrong. I see these smirks pop up. Truthfully, this is how we learn. Think of how many times we skidded a turn before we ever knew how to carve one.
Melodie.
Yes.
Hi,
John.
There's a term that I like and use a lot. It's called contextual intelligence, and it's that capability to extract from the environment around you, from the context around you, what's going on in the immediate vicinity, but at the same time looking back and forward to create a context for that, and working with people to understand where they're coming from and what their aspirations are in the context of the current time is very important to me and the work I get to do.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I like that. Thank you. Someone else.
Melodie, this is Matt. So number one, there are other people in the universe that I have to pay attention to. Is that true? So the second half of it is, for me, the social awareness stuff doesn't happen easily unless I'm in a comfortable place already, right? That I have to be secure in what I'm doing or teaching or the situation before I can even start to look at others' needs and emotional desires. So.
I hear you, Matt. Something that strikes me that we talk a lot about out on the Hill, and then Shannon, I'll have you next, is I think about Maslow's. I mean, we talk about it all the time and we joke about it, but it's like really, really making sure that you yourself are at the minimum in belonging and being able to move from there, and then being thoughtful about what that means within each connection and relationship out on the Hill. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Awesome. Shannon. Oh, I can't hear you. Nope.
Unmute.
Yeah, there it is.
Just to take off on what Matt said, I think being comfortable with what you are doing and your knowledge of the subject is really important. And I'll take it back to my job in that I work for Hilleberg, and my job is customer service and product knowledge. And I will say that when I first started, it was very nerve-wracking. But as I learned the product really well, then I am now very comfortable with it. And in terms of having to understand people's emotional place where they're coming from, it really, I have to deal so much on the phone with people and through email. So I don't get to have as much face-to-face contact with those folks. They may be emailing me from the middle of South America and they're in trouble and they're pissed off because they spent $1,000 on their tent. So I have to figure out all the time, how am I going to help them in the best way possible, understanding how upset they are or where they're coming at or all that. So that's more for me. It's a lot through email and phone.
I hear you. Thanks for sharing that. That's got to be really hard. Yeah.
It's a skill you learn, but I think what Matt said, if you know your product really well and understand the situations they're going to be in, it's much easier to do.
Awesome. I feel like you're foreshadowing, but a couple chapters within our 30 minutes together when we talk about the value of expertise. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about the foundation of what we build so that we can provide excellent social awareness and also relationship management and even self-awareness to build that trust. That's awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to contribute? Social awareness. Awesome. Thank you for those of you who did. Excellent. So one of the things that comes up in this chapter that I think is worth opening conversation is, what does it really look like? What does that social awareness looks like? I feel like sometimes we talk about these things and the reality is that learning to identify is actually different. Right? Learning how to look for that posture, learning how to know when to move in, or learning how to know when to offer empathy, or if empathy is appropriate for you and where you're at. As Matt mentioned, kind of making sure that you feel safe and that your basic needs are met. That's really important to know, like, is it if empathy is appropriate? But before we dive into that, I'd love to get a definition for empathy amongst the group. Does someone have one that they want to share? Get it wrong. It's okay to be wrong. Yeah, Jeffra. Oh, I can't hear you.
Couldn't figure out that unmute. I think empathy to me is thinking about what the other person is feeling and kind of trying to put yourself in their shoes.
Awesome. Thank you. I like that. Good. I want to share a couple of definitions that I pulled from some of our researchers. So let's start with, let's see. Empathy is cultivated by courage, compassion, and connection, and is the most powerful antidote to shame. Right? Let's see, I've got another one here. Last one was from Brene Brown. Empathy is a skill. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the emotions of others. And it's important to emphasize the ability because it's a developed skill to be able to understand the emotion and to make sure that because we don't have to be able to, when we're honing the skill, we don't actually have to be able to relate to what it's like to maybe break your foot, right? But you could probably tap into an experience in your life where you had something that changed the outcome of you, that experienced pain, and it created discomfort, and it changed the trajectory of what your plans were. So there were the whole kind of domino effect of what your life, how your life changed based on something that happened to you. And that's oftentimes how we can express empathy and share it with somebody else. And especially in the context of snow sports, you know, these are the types of some of the things we may see happen. Somebody who faces an injury or a loss, we can pull up the emotions around loss. And that's where that empathy can oftentimes come from. I do want to make sure that we I offer just a short definition of the difference between empathy and sympathy, right? So, right, empathy and sympathy. Empathy is heartbreaking. You experience other people's pain and joy. Sympathy is easier because you just have to feel sorry for someone. If you're feeling empathy, you're in the feeling. If it's sympathy, you're feeling sorry for someone. I do want to direct you, so after we've indulged today with each other, there's a link in the chat, and there's I really appreciate this video. It's from Brene Brown. It's animated, and it really describes the difference between empathy and sympathy well. And honestly, the very brief description is something that I fall back on often when I'm trying to describe the difference of these two. Excellent. All right, how are we doing on social awareness? Good. Let's talk about relationship management. All right. Would somebody like to define what relationship management in their own words? It's okay. Again, get it wrong. It's okay to not nail it every time. That's the reality. These things are hard.
Huh.
I see some good pondering.
Well, this is Shannon.
Yeah.
I think that's a big, broad subject.
It is.
And if I was thinking of relationship management, I guess with my students, so many of my students that I teach are what I call tweens. They're the 10 to 13-year-old kind of kidlet. And to manage that relationship can be really tricky, of course. And there you would probably have to have some empathy to understand where they're coming from to be able to build some kind of relationship that allows you to be successful and to be able to communicate with them.
Awesome.
It's an up and down daily process, which I know everybody who teaches sports or teaches anything knows. So
excellent. Someone else want to add to that? Yeah, Jeffra.
I think of it as kind of developing trust, developing rapport. I think it has to be, when you talk about management, it has to be ongoing. So it isn't like all of a sudden there, but you're always building on it, starting small and creating more of it.
Yeah,
awesome.
I agree with the building trust and building.
Awesome. I'm hearing a lot of references to what creates good relationship management, which I think is really important. Like, we build into these pieces when it comes to, we have to invest. I hear a lot about investment. So investing in building trust, and we invest in building connection, and we invest in being capable of showing up. So being able to offer connection, right? Excellent. I want to read just the first sentence on relationship management to you. Relationship management is about understanding the emotions behind a person's thoughts and actions, and using what you know about your own emotions and theirs to build and sustain a meaningful relationship. So I do hear a lot of the core roots of empathy in there. Right? I really appreciate that connection. Right? Excellent. Great. All right, so the other pieces that I want to dive into is I want to talk about trust, likability, and expertise. Right? So starting with trust, the bones of this from our snow sports manual talks about honesty, respect, transparency, consistent, and good judgment. Right? Does someone want to offer some examples of what that might look like in practice?
For me,
Matt, I see you.
can I?
Yes, Shannon.
I think, thinking just in terms of the group of kids and when you're introduced to them for the first time, and I have multi-week classes, which I love, just making sure that they understand how much I care about them. And that may be just emphasizing the rules of responsibility for me and going over them and talking about being safe and taking care of one another. Be maybe the first part of building trust. And then having really honest, constructive thoughts about their skiing and what they're doing, and being able to say, yeah, this is great, or let's do this, improve here, or whatever. But something where it's not, it's very honest. I don't know how to describe it, but anyway.
I think that's great, Shannon. Thank you for speaking up on it. Awesome. So I heard you talk specifically a lot about honesty and being truthful. Respect, I heard you mention some respect. Transparency. To me, that looks like being open and honest, especially about things that we don't have control over, right? Oftentimes, I think that in our culture, we have a tendency to kind of try to smooth things over, when the truth is that usually just causes confusions and breaks down trust that we've already built. Excellent. Consistency. I mean, I think that that's something that we value, especially as a division. When we show up, we get out there, we're on the hill, and, we show up on time, we show up ready, and what we offer is consistent, right? I also think that kind of rolls back into kind of foundation of what Matt brought up in the beginning, is that also helps provide a really safe support, so that people have something to lean back on. They always know that they're going to get at least some version of this experience with this person. So there starts to build that relationship that they're looking forward to, right? Awesome. And good judgment. I mean, I think that's an excellent attribute that when we're thinking about little things, so that could be, I am thinking about my own personal experiences of, if I'm out on a hill and someone says, oh gosh, it's cold and it's windy, and I can see that, you're not, that you're uncomfortable, which we as professionals know that means no one's learning, right? Or I'm not learning for sure. And so to be able to extend just a little bit of empathy in that moment, then rolls into that support within that building of trust. Yeah. Awesome. All right, likability. So I have to say, when I started digging into this, my alarm bells went off. I just said, oh my gosh, likability. I feel like this is the thing that people are like, isn't that just how you hire? Don't you just hire for likability? You can't teach that, And so I think it's really neat to have some substantiated key notes within here that we can look at, and some bullet pointed things that I can show you on a piece of paper. Here are some attributes. And I really appreciate where these are coming from, because I think there are things that if you think about the people in your life, in your everyday life, whether it's on the mountain or off, think about the people that you're like, wow, I really like them. And maybe you don't really know why. Sometimes I like to kind of joke and say, oh, they have good vibes or something. Or I just, from the moment I saw them, I just thought that person was great. And then to be able to look at these things and to almost just start checking boxes, So let's go through them really quickly. Empathetic. We've already talked about empathy, right? And the difference between sympathy and empathy. Those are really different, right? Supportive. They have a vested interest in you, right? It's really different. Someone who's really only interested in your outcome versus how you get to the outcome, right? I think every single person here could probably share an example of that. That person invested in your outcome, that's the person you want to stay close to. Awesome. Polite and respectful, right? I know that in a more casual atmosphere, the guidelines of what that looks like may not be as fluent, right? It may not be super clear that, you know, I need to wear my suit, or I may need to abide by these things, but being polite and considerate and being inclusive, a word that I like to add to that is an element of inclusivity. Awesome. Patient. One thing that I've noticed is that when it comes to so I want to take a little ownership here, and I know some of you I know really, really well, and others of you this might be our first mark for our future friendship. So thank you for that. And I work specifically in the adaptive snow sports world, but do invest a lot of time in the alpine space. And patience is something that I talk about a lot. And I talk about that the value of letting someone be where they're at in that moment, and as long as they need to be, can be the difference between them having an incredible experience. And what that looks like in real time is oftentimes exceeds our expectations. And being willing to see something that you don't, that's outside of whatever that preconceived expectations are. Awesome. Attentive. I think that it feels really nice to be attended to, right? Listening carefully, concentrating on the interaction. Excellent. Friendly. Acting pleasantly, fun to be with, and easy to talk to. Excellent. Inspirational. Exhibiting qualities that are admirable. Right? I have to say that for me personally, the idea of someone who is inspirational oftentimes comes with that likability essence of like, oh, I just really like that person. They're really cool, or I just want to be around them. And then I add to that inspirational. I'm like, and again, another thing that I find challenging to define, and that's what I like about this moment, is I feel challenged to work on substantiating a definition for that so I can clearly articulate that, because I take on a level of responsibility to be able to let someone else know what that actually means. What does it mean to be inspirational, right? I think that's really important. Does anyone want to add anything to any of those attributes of someone who is likable? Yes, Jeffra.
So I think the one thing I think about in terms of defining likability is also sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody is not genuine, is not sincere, you kind of seem like you notice that right away. And I think if you're not sincere with your students as well.
I really, really like that. Thank you. Anyone else want to add something to that?
Melodie, let me.
Please.
You know, I work adaptive with you, and I also have done a lot of alpine. And one of the things I learned from my wife years ago, who's a kindergarten teacher, is to deal directly with the student. If there's parents there, caregivers there, spouses or whatever, get down on the level of a child so that you're looking them in the eye and you're explaining everything to them, and not speaking directly to the parent, if you will, or whatever it might be, and talking over the top of, or despite, or regardless of that, our actual student there. It's important to engage the student eye to eye level to eye level, and to let the parents just overhear it. That's it.
That's nice, John, and such a huge reminder that how important it is to, if you're going to build any of these qualities, it's got to happen with the person that you're going to be out on the snow with. Yeah,
my experience is parents often are really impressed by doing that kind of thing. They really are.
Good. That's awesome. Yes, I hear you. Thanks, John. Excellent. All right, can we move on to expertise? All right, I'm seeing some general yeses. I like this. Awesome. All right, so positive interactions that lead to productive outcomes are also based on expertise, a person having knowledge about a topic. Right? All right, the supporting concepts: provide leadership, make decisions, solve problems, deal with challenges, and provide new perspectives. Would anyone like to elaborate on one of those? There's one that I really appreciate, deal with challenges. So the elaboration on that is have a base knowledge to support creative thinking. And I read this one a few times within the context. And what I found was this is, for me, is the skill set of when I'm a learner or if I'm a teacher, whether it's to a clinic group or to my student, it's the ability for the person who has the greater level of expertise to be able to move with the information that's being provided by the student or by the learner, which I find really valuable. So being able to adapt to change, but then bringing it all almost another level higher. I think an example that quickly came to mind that I'm sure we're all really familiar is thinking about our technical fundamentals. Right? So how often have we had in a conversation about our technical fundamentals, specifically our Alpine one for my ease, so thank you, is when someone is talking, maybe a learner is talking about one specific fundamental, and the leader, right, the person with the expertise can then actually has the opportunity to converse in and bring maybe another perspective to the table, right? Instead of looking and saying, oh, you're wrong because that wasn't the prioritized fundamental, you can say, you know, you have this opportunity to say, oh, I see where you're coming from. Could it also be this? Because they have the ability to be creative. They have the knowledge, so the knowing, to be able to see outside of just a singular answer. I'm seeing some good head shakes. Awesome. Excellent. All right. So a couple of things. We're going to wrap up here pretty soon. First, before I do anything else, a quick cheers. I didn't get creative today. I have ice water. It was just too much. Awesome. It's really, really nice to see everyone's faces. I do have a couple of announcements I want to make for next week. Next week, we'll have our first special guest, Linda Cowan. I highly encourage you to do the pre-reading. So we will be moving out of the people skills chapter for next week. But what's neat is that we're going to dive into some information that's going to be really supported in our conversation with Linda next week. Those page numbers are already listed in the events listing for May 15th, so you can grab them there. I'm also happy to articulate them to you if you are a I'm at my desk, tell me now person. All right, so it'll be pages 45 to 46. All right, it's teaching strategies through collaboration. And then it'll be the middle of page 50 to the top of page 51, linking new learning to known experiences through scaffolding. All right, so read all the way through the end of scaffolding. And then you'll skip a few pages to page 58 and 59. And that will be the section on structured reflection. Right? I do want to remind you, please send me questions if you have them for our guests. I want to hear what you want to know. All right. I really enjoy doing research for these and pulling information from our manual and whatnot. So I'm happy to do it all the day long, but I also want to make sure that I'm serving you. I want to make sure you walk away. I want you to walk away from these with questions. I want you to be curious. I want you to come back and say, gosh, I'd really like to hear more about this. And I will say that my expectation, which totally could change, is that we'll probably go back to the people skills chapter. What I'm noticing is that my opportunity to highlight the expertise of the guests that I have lined up, I think is going to be best served if we dive into the content that they're very knowledgeable about, or even maybe in this case has helped write these or wrote them independently for our snow sports manual. Right. There are some future opportunities coming up on the events webpage for PSIA Northwest, so check those out. We have a people skills class that will be giving you ed credit. That looks like it will be posted hopefully the first week of June, so keep your eyes peeled. I'll continue to provide more information about that as that becomes available. From the brief conversations I've had with Jen, who's on here, it sounds like these two programs will be very supportive of each other. So an opportunity for where you can get some conversation and then follow under Jen's guidance for more in-depth conversations, right? Any questions before we wrap it up? No? Awesome. I look forward to seeing an email, even if it's just hi. The information you need here is in the chat. I'll leave that on for a few minutes for those of you who haven't had a chance to grab it. And remember, you can go back to the PSIA Northwest events webpage and grab any of these links that are left. Thanks for spending your Friday afternoon with me. Bye.